Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist is a lo-fi style producer with a range beyond any limits. Ranging in styles and sounds from one release to the next, you never know where he's going next. Fellow WMU Bronco and friend of mine, it doesn't get cooler than this guy. Welcome, Eyan.
Woo! Woo! Hello.
So I always like to start off with where your kind of journey with music started.
Yeah. So funnily enough, I'd always had a very like musical upbringing. Like my parents got me, the piano lessons from like 5 to 8, and I was like really good. And then I stopped because like practice, who wants to do that? Um, and then like I got into drums like a little bit. And that's what like really got me into playing band from middle school until like maybe college. Um, when I got into high school, my friend had hit me up and he was like, "Hey, like there's this free like music software, like we should try it out and see what happens." And that was FL Studio. Um, and I was in love with it ever since. I think we were trying to do like a it's this video game Assassin's Creed. We were trying to like do like a remix of like the intro music, which is super cringe, and I hope I don't find that file that I've made like forever ago. But um yeah, it just kind of took off from there, from the more electronic production side. Yeah. That's how I got into it, I guess. And just like listening to a lot of different kinds of music as well. Like um I've always found that electronic music was really always pioneering different sounds and like the way we can manipulate um things that aren't like acoustic in that sense. Like we can make a guitar sound like a fucking like weird growling thing, or like it's the endless possibilities of like electronic music was too cool to pass up. So
So what took it from the initial we're going to remix this video game intro to actually like putting together your own different things? Like was it a process of experimenting with different sounds? Like where did it, because I mean, I don't know if this is present day Eyan at the time looking at it and being, "Oh, this is cringe," or if it's
yeah.
just
Yeah,
22, 23-year-old Eyan looking at it like this is disgusting
yeah, this
compared to
is
like
yeah.
this is not it. So like where was it from that remix that went like where in that process did you unlock something that was really like, oh, like instead of just like taking these pieces and like doing my own thing with it, I can completely create from scratch. Like where did that transition happen?
Yeah, I think it was more of me just really sitting down and being like, okay, why why don't I just like create something? Like I'd always seen, I think it really stemmed from watching the tutorials at first to see like how other people were making their sounds, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I could really like create my own world in this like program. um so like that's how the curiosity started. I think where the passion really came in was I think junior year of high school. I'd entered in a ILMEA. The couldn't tell you the acronym for that, but I know it's like Illinois Music Education, maybe associate, maybe I might have made that up, but they had like a remix competition, and they had it was essentially like they just put all the stems in this folder, they sent it out. My band director knew that I like made music on the
Mm-hmm.
side, and he was like, hey, like you should enter in this remix competition. And it was funny because I hadn't listened to the original song. I just took the stems and I was like, let me just see what I can make. And then
Mm.
I won. So that was like really what started me to be like, okay, like maybe I can like actually push this past, oh, like this is just like a cute little side hobby thing. Like it was like maybe I
Mm.
could like really start making a career out of it. So
So I mean, honestly, I think look when it comes to remixes and stuff like that, it's like it's sometimes the less familiar you are with the song, almost the better you can do it because
mhm.
you don't have that original sound ingrained in your mind. Like this is what it's like. This is the only way I know it. I can't like step away from that.
Yes. Yeah.
You don't have to maintain that integrity because that integrity for you was never really there.
Right. And yeah, no, that's 100% right. And I think a lot of times people do want to hear like the ooh, like they still kept that melody, or like ooh, like that was a callback
Yeah.
to the like original, which like would have been cool. But yeah, I think at the time, like I was really, or I guess still now, like I'm always really pushing for nuances in music to be like, okay, like where can this progress? Like where can the my background of music, where can I really slam that in and really make it something of my own? So
Yeah, and I mean, it really is just kind of taking it down to the core of it. You can do all the callbacks you want, but what's gonna make it
mhm.
actually something cool is like just taking your own total spin on it from the get go.
Yeah.
What do you think? Obviously, like I've had previous conversations like this, but it's typically like people I have sitting here are like songwriters first. Like I grew up singing, whatever, like very much from a like lyric kind of songwriting background. It's not really your ordeal. So what kind of inspires a lot of the songs you put together? Like where did those ideas come from? Is it a sound? Is it just a general concept or something like where do a lot of your songs kind of start to and then really build into?
Yeah, so I think my writing process before was really, if I'm listening or if I want to create a certain genre,
Mhm.
I would spend a week listening to just strictly that genre.
Mm.
Not so much of an artist, but it was just more of like if I wanted to create like a drum and bass sketch type thing, I would listen to like all of like the Spotify curated playlists, or like ask homies like, hey, like what do you listen to?
Mhm.
Um, Spend a week just like listening to different sounds and like how different producers and artists have their own take. Um, and then I'll just sit down and like try to um, be like, okay, well, like this intro section, I liked how this artist did it. So let me try to copy that. Oh, but this drop I liked from this other song. Let me try to copy that, so on and so forth. So it's like, it's really like taking a bunch of little nitty gritty um, ideas from different songs and then like making it into a sandwich, which is now just like a totally new type of thing. So like that's um yeah, that's how I got the inspiration, or like the yeah, just like the inspiration for creating. um a lot of the times it is hard to do it that way, only because of I'll sometimes get into a rut of like, oh, like I'm listening to this genre too much to the point where it's like nothing new is coming.
Mhm.
So then I'll have to like really do a 180 and be like, you know what, like let me listen to some Katy Perry, let me listen to some Taylor Swift, or like Foster the People, like to really be like, okay, like how can I um just get out of this box that I put myself in,
Mhm.
and really be like, okay, like how can all types of music really fit into um what I'm creating.
So is that the approach that you still take a lot of the time is like using what you're listening to or like kind of targeting in a way of like, okay, this is what I want to be writing, so I need to listen to this kind of stuff? Is that still the approach that you continue to take?
A little less now. It is still like, if I would say like the beginning stages, it would be
Mhm.
like, okay, like let me like really listen to this genre and
Right.
see. Um, and then like throughout the process, um, that's when I'll give like my ears like a little bit of a break to be like, okay, like um, let me listen to completely like not even electronic music, but like just other
Mhm.
genres, to really see like how their engineers or their producers are like curating their songs to make it sound pleasable to that audience, and how can I bring that element into now the electronic space.
Do you think that I mean, obviously, like in those early stages of just, okay, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to listen to make that happen. I mean, you kind of have to do some of that because it's, especially when you're in your early career, if you will, like
Hmm.
you got to start somewhere. And if it's like,
Yeah.
that's where you kind of want to put a target on something and be like, okay, this is what I'm shooting for. Then you can kind of evaluate, is this me? Is this not? Am I doing that in the right way? I like what you said about the sandwich thing because it is like we take different pieces from different things no matter what kind of music it is. But do you think that bringing in these outside of the electronic world elements, like in like when you were referencing pop and like even rock and stuff like that, do you think that bringing those in is something of like a smooth process, or is it a bit of a challenge sometimes to make it where it's like those two things can kind of coexist in a like cohesive manner, or is it
Mm.
like it just kind of can happen naturally? Because like a lot of times we get electronic remixes of these pop songs, and so like
Right.
that's where they can kind of fit together. But what kind of approach do you take to bringing in these different elements into the electronic world without making it seem like that doesn't belong on the sandwich?
Right. Sometimes it's so I think I'll preface this before I really get into my answer of in the electronic community, like especially like when I was going through Western and stuff, um, I would see some of the cats like really be like, oh, like I like this producer,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just gonna watch all of their tutorials and like mimic their creation and like put it like maybe change the key or like do a little bit of stuff, but it was really like, oh, like they're just like really copying that artist, if that makes sense,
Right.
which I think is okay to do in the sense of like, okay, like now the process of you know how to make that sound or like the mixing style or um all that sort of stuff. But I think that'll also like put you in a box of like, okay, well now everyone is starting to sound the same because of like the leading producer has made the sound that everyone likes, but now everyone else wants to be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like I want to sound like that guy, so let's jump on that. So um I think how I tie in different genres into the electronic
Mm-hmm.
portion of it is really to um whether it's like certain catchy melodies that happen or like certain phrases or phrasing, um and even sometimes like instruments too, like sometimes using more acoustic elements in electronic music can like really give it like less cold life, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
because um it's what am I trying to say, it's really all about uh man, I lost my train of thought. uh Bringing, I would say yes, like just bringing in small portions
Mm-hmm.
to help guide me to the next, whether it's the section or maybe even the next idea. um it's more of a bridge and less of a building piece, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the whole like people just kind of, oh, I really like what this person does. Let me just kind of study everything that this person does and recreate
Hmm.
that myself. Like people, you can very easily, especially when you're in an early stage of like, I don't know what I'm doing kind of deal. You can
Hmm.
very easily find yourself in that space. But and it's great to learn from the people that are ahead of you beyond where you're at, like further along in the game. But what you ultimately have to do is take a step back and be like, okay, these are the resources. How am I going to use those resources not to re-articulate what they're doing, but
Hmm.
articulate this new thing that I am then doing? So that's what's like what is interesting to me as someone who has never touched electronic music in their life and probably never will, it's interesting that like because it's kind of as a whole a very much a conglomeration of everything else around it. Like
Yeah,
there's so much like electronic music in itself is like saying pop music. Like you can get from one end to the other and
right.
it'll take you forever. Like there's so many different pieces to the puzzle, but it's it is ultimately like it takes influence and aspects of a lot of these other types of music in a very interesting way. And so then it enables you to kind of get away from just doing the same thing that every Joe Schmo is already doing.
Yeah, because I think that's why like again like really I like love electronic music is because it is so foreign and it's still like really foreign now, you
Hmm.
know? Like um anyone could pick up the guitar and like instantly like if you have like a certain register, you'd be like, "Oh, you sound like so and so from the 60s," or like, "Oh, you sound like T Swift," or "Oh, like you
Yeah.
sound like," you know. So it's like instantly like that, but I feel like more within the electronic realm, like you can really go from the weird avant-garde, like ones and zeros coding, kind of like sounding like your computer is about to explode type of art. And then maybe on the other spectrum, like just adding like a little, you know, glittery synths to like someone's like singer-songwriter project,
Hmm.
or like, you know, somewhere in between that. So I feel like the range for electronic music is so big, but like I feel like a lot of people don't really capitalize on that because
Hmm.
it's so huge. Like
It's a scary
it's a
beast.
yes, yes, very
It's a
much
scary
so.
beast.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's crazy. Going off of talking about genres and all that, if you had to create a new genre around your style of music, what would you call
Oh,
it?
uh, um, new genre. I would say new dance
Okay.
because the only reason why I say that is because I am now like I have like a bunch of songs like just sitting on my computer,
Hmm.
like I haven't
Don't we
touched.
all?
Yeah, right. Like I this might be on record, and if any of the profs see this, sorry about it, but like my whole entire capstone is still like on my computer, still like, and like I've listened to it and I was like, man, like this, it's cool. It's going in the direction that I want to,
Hmm.
but something inside of me is like, dude, like it's not it, man. So, but
Like
a
it's
lot
not
of it,
there yet, or like it's just it's not as good as we once thought it was. Like is it like a it
both.
just needs like some extra pieces or more mixing or something that's gonna get it there, or just are you thinking about
Some
scrapping it all together? Because I'm saying no to that one.
some songs, yes, it is more of like, oh, like just the mixing. Like I just gotta like tackle it for like a couple days and like it'll be set to go. But others, it's just like it's really I'm trying to go for um like an evolved sound. Like each song that I create, like I want it to be like, oh, like this is so different from this last project, or like, oh, he's like really improved on like
Hmm.
really um using his soundscape and like really like being able to put what I'm hearing in my head like on my computer very
Right.
um coherently. And some of the projects don't really resemble that as good as I want it to.
Okay.
But a lot of those songs on that capstone are like they're danceable. They're
Hmm.
at that tempo where it's like, okay, like you can bob your head, like stuff like that. You can like get a little jiggy with it. Um, so I would just say new dance only because like it's I don't want to stick to like just, you know, like making house music or like just making um like any one type of genre, but I do want people to be able to like move, groove, like get into it. Um
So just forever evolving dance style
Yeah,
music.
yeah. Dance and like the occasional like chill like whatever because like I like that's the I love listening to that too. Like sometimes I want to come home and be like, okay, like let me just like chill out to something.
Hmm.
And so like I would say
Can't
like
dance
those
all the
two, like
time.
right, 100%. Sometimes you gotta sit down and you're like, damn, like I gotta start hitting the gym, but this chill song is coming on, so like I could take a breather and then we could jump back in, you know?
Right.
So
Right. No, absolutely. And it's it's forever a question of, is this done, or am I just like
yes.
questioning everything that I put into it?
Yes.
Sometimes that question never gets answered and those projects or songs sit around forever, but sometimes we just
Yes.
have to learn to pull the trigger. That is probably the biggest like self-development thing every artist needs, is just the ability to pull the trigger when things are even 95%, 90% done.
Yeah,
Because
that's
you
what
can sit
I
on a song forever and make 1,000 different changes, but
mhm.
it's all just subjective at the end of the day. And if it's mostly there, sometimes you just got to do it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, like that's actually what happened to my latest single that came out. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had finished that in January and um I was just like sitting on it because I was like, no one's gonna like this. Like and the only reason why I would say that is because I've been constantly listening to it and
Mm,
like it's like over and over and over and like even like I would do like car test mixes like
yeah.
play it on my homies like speakers, like play it on my AirPods or like stuff like that. So it's like constantly listening to it. Um, you do kind of fall into the realm of like, oh, like is it bad or am I just tired of listening to it? Um,
Yeah.
you
that's
know,
that's the that's the thing.
and I think sometimes it's refreshing to like have friends or colleagues to be like, hey, like can you listen to this and like give your
Hmm.
honest feedback on that. um but unfortunately a lot of the times like I'll either persevere through it and I'm like, you know what, like it's not that bad, the mix is pretty good, let's just push it out, or I'm like, man, like I'm just not feeling it, so like I'll just
Hmm.
delete it and then just start a new project. So
I don't even think, I don't think hitting the delete button is ever necessarily a good idea, but because you never know
it
when you like, because you could always use a piece of it later on, like that's why so many people sit on, like I have tons of different lyrics and voice recordings and things that I wrote just one night and probably never touched since the day I wrote it. Then, and some are probably from like freaking 2017.
yeah,
So you never know when that, I mean, it would take me going back through it and identifying it and using it to actually make it worthwhile, but at the same time, it still exists. I haven't hit delete yet, so can't
yeah,
just pull
I
the trigger on the delete button too quickly.
unfortunately I think that's my toxic trait as an artist. I'll just, if it's not working out, like if it's like a week and I'm like, dude, like it's been a week and I'm still not vibing with it, I'll just like bloop, like that'll be it. And I'll just
Wow.
move on with the next project. And like 9 times out of 10, like it'll really be like um it'll be like, oh man, like now like I'm writing so much more, like I'm so
Better
much more
stuff.
efficient now. Yes.
Mm,
And
okay.
like writing better sounds because now it's like the first sketch was like maybe like a warm up, getting my brain juices working,
Okay.
and then it'll be like, okay, like now I'm like really ready to sit down and like really put my heart into it. So
Okay. Well, then if it works, it works. But
right, it is
yeah.
definitely bad. Like I'm not defending, like deleting every project because
Right.
but
Right.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I think part of that difference is, to me, is like if I put something in a Logic project, I'm finishing it, or I'm at least like leaving it there to touch later. Yours starts there. For me, I've already sat at the piano or the guitar and put something
yeah,
together and put the idea together. So like I might just leave it because it takes that extra step of recording it. Then I'll just leave it. I also just, I don't think I can pull the delete button. I'm more of I'm a music hoarder, if you will.
no,
I
that's
can't
good,
just I
that's
can't
way
just
better,
can't just throw it in the trash.
that's
So
that's way better.
it is until my computer's out of storage. But
No, right.
is there a release or a song that you've put out that you think best embodies who you are as an artist? One song only. You have to convince somebody to be a fan of your stuff, what song do you show them?
Uh, Pondering. That's the one, man. That's my um. It's really the sound that I wanted to really start going,
Mm-hmm.
and like heading towards, in terms of um, like I didn't really use any chords. Like all of the sounds that you hear, like besides like the bass and like some drums, was like all um like vocal chops and like vocal recordings of like from Splice, and like really manipulating it with like LFOs and different effects and stuff like that. So like I would say that one. And it's like, me personally, like that one I can like listen to and be like, okay, like I might get tired of it, but it's still like a good mix. So like
That's
that
the
one's
one.
also like,
That's the one at the end of the day you will always recognize as a good
yeah,
song.
yep.
Okay. All right. Well, here is a snippet of Pondering. Um, if you had to pick two or three artists that you think your music is a combination of or a product of, like three artists that you think kind of influence your music as a whole, who would you choose?
Oh gosh. Man, because I'm trying to think of, because I want to do like some of my older stuff too. Um, I would say the lo-fi album was really like quickly. I drew a lot of inspiration from him in terms of like the lo-fi stuff. Um, my latest single, I would say Shark Tunes or Sharks. He's like really, he's really making some weird stuff, and like his sound design is like crazy. Like that's where I really want to get to, is like close to his kind of like level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I guess oh gosh, I don't know. That's an interesting one, because like every like release that I have, it's a different
Set of,
artist that I've been like
yeah.
listening to. So I guess I'll throw in like uh uh I'll throw in this guy called Mord Fustang. I'll throw that one in there for house ish type beats. So that's those are my three. Those are my
Okay.
random three.
I mean, I'm not familiar enough to know that they could be in 10 different directions, but that kind of
They're definitely
all over the place.
yep.
Um that kind of brings up a good point of like, if you, like you said, like with every release you kind of take things in a different direction, take from different inspirations, stuff like that. What is it then that you think about, like from project to project, like what is it that kind of stays for the lack of a better word, consistent in a way that's like making it still clearly you, that really like what is it that like if I were to listen to a project from 2020 and your latest release, what is it about those like things that is going to stick out to me as this is the same guy?
Oh gosh.
Is there any like continuous element or like the way you approach different things or structure or something that you kind of carry from one thing to the next that doesn't really like lose that sense of Eyan on it?
Yeah.
Or is it really just kind of like a little like what is it that where is the Eyan taste to every which different thing?
I think that's like a really good question. I think what comes to mind like automatically is like I love to start on the chorus of every
Mm-hmm.
song.
Oh,
So it's kind of like a okay, like I know where like this will be like the most expansive part in the song. Let me start writing that so that way I can have kind of like a roadmap to like okay, like how do I want to get into this, and then I'll be like okay, it's here, so now how can I like base the rest of the song off of this one chorus part. um so I would say like the choruses for all my songs are better than everything else because it's like that's where I'm putting like the maximum
focus.
amount of effort like in is like the chorus. So like if you're listening to a song and you're like damn, like this chorus is like ripping, like that'll be I guess that's my bread and butter. um
Okay.
I think I think that's really it because I really do want to like really I think when I started making music, I really wanted to make it a point of it's electronic music. And during my time of like making it, so many people uh like especially in high school would be like, oh, like electronic music, like it's the same repetitive, like this and this and that, like whatever, whatever. And I really wanted to like break away from that and be like, okay, well, since they think like electronic music is so repetitive, let me just make every song so different to the point where it's like, okay, like where is he gonna go next? And like just
Mm.
having that kind of like mystery is pretty cool. So
I mean, that kind of also goes back to how we were talking about that there's just an endless possibility when it comes to electronic music. Like there's so much that it really kind of embodies, and you never really know what you're going to get in general. And so like being able
yeah.
to find that within one artist isn't something that I feel like you see very often.
Yeah, and I think that might be like a sort of a downfall too, because I know that a lot of people do want to listen to artists as like a comfort thing to be like, okay, like they're
You know what you're going
staying
to get.
consistent. Right, exactly. So like it might be a downfall, but it's like that'll just take the fun out of it for me if
Mm.
I stay consistent. And also like sometimes the writing process can be really hard if I'm like, okay, like I'm only going to be focusing on this genre, so let me just write this genre. So
Yeah. Yeah, then it's just a matter of kind of getting too focused on where this is going to classify versus just the art of it itself.
yes, 100%.
What do you think is an outside passion of yours that impacts who you are as an artist?
Skateboarding. um Only because again like that one, I would say skateboarding and the little bit of philosophy that I've been reading, um because I feel like they go hand in hand. um so my philosophy is existentialism, where your existence precedes the essence of what people want to try to have you um kind of like assign, or what people assign to you essentially. um and it's like there are like people can just do whatever. Like we
Mm-hmm.
all have we weren't created to wait tables. We weren't created to make music. We weren't created to do whatever, but we can do whatever. um and I feel like that was really freeing to me because it was like okay, like I am now having to constantly think of like going outside the box and like really not wanting to put myself in a situation where I'm following a set formula, because a lot of the times some of the formulas, especially in electronic music, are so much the same that it really is kind of like, okay, like there's a genre, but like all the artists under that genre just kind of like sound the same. um and skateboarding also like ties into that, because it's like, um with that, it's like everyone can do the same trick. Like there's no differences in what a kick flip is, or like differences in like what like a tray flip is, but everyone does it differently to where it might be the same trick but it looks different. It
Mm.
visually it looks different. And so um having that kind of like ground me as well, to not being some avant-garde, like I'm just messing with how to blow up my computer, like what my computer can handle. It's more of like, okay, like if other artists are doing that, how can I do what they're doing but still find a way of it sounding different, and also feel like I'm putting my expression onto it, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And I think you kind of answered the question I asked earlier, even more so now with like what makes one release from the next the same is it's like you're doing it in like your own way. What necessarily
Mm-hmm.
that way is, you probably
No,
gonna have to
I don't
throw
know.
some total like jargon at it or whatever, but
Right.
like it's not, oh, like I'm just gonna show up and try to like make the most lo-fi thing I can make. It's like, no, this is the
Right.
style that I'm targeting, but you're
Mm-hmm.
still like approaching it from a different way. Because, and I think the other thing is too is like, okay, let's say like lo-fi was like that was one of your more recent projects. Like if we're dating back to 2020, that was something completely different. You're coming from that background, now taking it onto this, and it's like, okay, I'm doing this, but I've not been doing this type of thing this entire time. So
Right.
it's not like within these same limits. It's not, oh, you heard that, you're going to know exactly what you're expecting in this. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm approaching this new style with the knowledge of styles that aren't exactly like this. And it's a different kind of taste on it. And like you said, like we weren't necessarily like, like there is this expectation, but there's not. It's like you don't know. You can expect it to be lo-fi esque, but it's also going to be Eyan esque. It's going to be your
Yes.
own take on what this genre is, what that genre is, what this style is, like all those different kinds of things. It's just through your filter or through your voice.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
I feel like a lot of times, like people, kind of struggle with that, because oftentimes, like, um, music is subjective,
mhm.
and sometimes what we like, other people aren't going to like. And so, uh, what I feel like some people kind of fall into of why they either, oh, Jesus Christ. That was scary. My fucking window just fucking flew open. Ugh, ugh. Like I said, heavy winds over here, man. Oh yeah, so like what a lot of people kind of fall into, of either why they just think it's like just like a pastime hobby, or like
Mhm.
why they fall off of music, is because they might have a um an aesthetic, I'll call it, of what they like in music,
Mhm.
but maybe the wider audience is like, oh, like we kind of like don't like that sound. And so a lot of people, or what I assume what happens is like, oh, like not a lot of people like my authentic um, sound or approach to music. So like that's it. That means like I'm not good. But it's like
Mm.
in reality, it's like as long as you're it should just be more of how are you expressing yourself through audio, like it's just like painting, like, I'm sure Picasso wasn't always drawing bangers or painting bangers. Like I'm sure he had some fifth grade looking painting that was like, you know what, like I did that for an afternoon. It looks like crap, but like, man, like I just had fun taking whatever's in here and putting it down there, or putting it on like a canvas. And so I think if people kind of like remind themselves of like, hey, like not every song is going to be a banger, or even like the genre that I'm producing in, maybe it doesn't have a wide audience, but I think as long as I'm doing it because I want to do it, doing it because like I have the love and passion and want to get my ideas onto my laptop,
Hmm.
then I think I'll always have my own sound rather than, okay, well, um, I see that this genre is popping off right now. Let me just make this genre and
Hmm.
make like a quick buck out of it. So,
Right. And I think this also kind of brings back the conversation of we are very much a product of the things we consume, the things we listen to, stuff like that. And I'm a firm believer that there is an audience for all kinds of music,
mm-hmm.
to like at least to some degree. Like if it's garbage, obviously I know that's subjective, but like if it's garbage, maybe not. But like it to
Right.
something of a like certain even like upper mid level standard, there's going to be an audience for everything. And the thing is, it's like, okay, like you're trying to write like so and so, you can hop on that audience, but since you're trying to be like someone that is already in existence, you're just going to cut into a small piece of that pie. But if you're like, oh, like I like the way they write their lyrics, I like the way that the guitars sound with this artist, I like the way that they use synths in this guys, and just put that all together. Like you take elements of what you enjoy and make that your own. Like that's what it is. Like that's why I
Mm-hmm.
asked the question, what artists is your music a product of? Because it's like, people that like Imagine Dragons, for instance, like might like somebody like this, like something
Yeah.
like where it's like, okay, I like this band, like these people aren't exactly like the same deal, but if they were the same deal, I would just still fucking listen to Imagine Dragons,
Right.
Like
Exactly. You'll
why?
always, yes.
Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
like you don't. That's why, like, just essentially putting your own take on it and doing what comes naturally is going to work. Like I like what you said about like, oh, this genre is really like the vibe right now. Like I'm gonna hop on that. Like if that's not what you're naturally drawn to, and I mean from a creative perspective, like from a creator's perspective, if that's not what you're drawn to creating, whatever you're going to put together isn't going to meet the standards of the thousands of other people that are
Mm-hmm.
doing that same thing, because that
Yeah.
happened for them naturally. Like the some
Yeah.
of the stuff, like there's to me there's for me personally, there's two types of music that I listen to. There's the stuff that's like what I write, and there's the stuff that I just can fucking appreciate and I know will never be the way that I approach music. And that's
Yeah.
totally fine. But if the
Yes.
minute I start trying to tap into this because, oh, maybe it's popping off, that's where I'm going to lose everything that I have over here. The
Mm-hmm.
more we're like targeting it to sound a certain way, and that goes beyond the genre thing. Like you said, like you've experimented with these different things, it's still kind of coming back to be you. It's not, I'm going to make the most lo-fi or the most drum and bass type of music. It's like, no, I'm going to take a stab at this and I'm going to like meet some of the criteria or like
Right.
outline kind of things of that genre, but I'm not going to try and be like whoever is like lo-fi's biggest person, like lo-fi's Taylor
Right.
Swift. Like I'm not aiming for that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
aiming for what my version of that genre looks like.
Yeah. And I think to add on to that point too is, I think if you'll always be I'll use cloud chaser in
Mm-hmm.
the sense, you'll always be behind, because
Right.
like you said, like, um the artists that are huge in those genres, the reason why is because like you said, like A, like they naturally just like it,
Mm-hmm.
and B, they're always finding different ways to reinvent that genre. But if you're always trying to catch up with the reinvention, then it's going to be like, oh, like now we're already over here, but you just got to where we were, like maybe even sometimes a year ago. Because I know, like with artists, it takes forever sometimes for like a
Hmm.
single to come out.
Yeah.
So if you're
By
like,
the
oh, like this single is bopping, that could have been like a 2-year-old project, you
yeah,
know?
by the time you're done, it'll be on to the next thing.
Right, 100%.
And it's just, like there's a we lose quality when we try to become intentional in the way of what we want people to see, to hear, to receive it as. If we're like, if it,
Hmm.
it's like not intentional in the way of like, oh, like this is the message I want to drive home with this song, or this is what I want the song to sound like. But if it's like, I want the song to sound like this, I want my like writing to be like theirs, that's where you
Yes.
lose it, because it's like,
Yep.
okay, like don't do what somebody else is doing because somebody else is already doing it.
Yes.
That's all it really boils
Like,
down to.
so yeah, no, 100%.
However we got there, we got there.
We
But
got there, you know?
no, I jumping back to the original question, like I like what you said about the whole philosophy thing of like, it's we're not really here to be doing any said which thing, so like we can do with it as we want. It's not
Hmm.
any rules to play by. Like the whole like the genre question that I ask every time, people don't like. I ask it for fun anyway, but people don't like because it's like it's hard enough to try and pick an existing genre that you think your music fits into. And now
Yeah.
you're going to ask me to make a new one? Like it probably already exists. There's like 1,000 different like can't even like the amount of different types of electronic music, the amount of different types of pop music, like
Yeah.
there's so many different breakdowns and subgenres and subgenres of subgenres. So it's like it's a whole thing, and just trying to classify your music in general is, but I mean genres just kind of set those sort of expectations, which is kind of the
Yeah.
opposite of what you were talking about. And we
It's
can
more of like I can appreciate the genre titles only because it's easier to describe your music, you
hmm
know?
it gives you a
Um,
sense of what you're going to get.
yes. Instead of it being like, oh, like just listen to it, because then you'll be like, oh, well, like I if I don't know like
Right.
vaguely what type of genre it is, then that's like doing more work than to be like, oh, like
Yeah.
it's more of like electronic with this type of element and this type of element, or it's like, oh, like it's more singer songwriter, but it's got this jazz element and like this element. Then it's
Right.
like, okay, like you can kind of like formulate it in your head to be like,
hmm
is that really pleasing to, and I'm talking this as like an audience perspective,
hmm
is that really pleasing for me to hear,
yeah.
or am I just like, maybe just like, oh, it's too vague, like I'm just gonna move on.
Yeah, and that I mean it because the other thing is like I could release a song with the same title as a song that you release, and like people like, okay, you say you search whatever the hell it's called, you could click on every which song. Our two
Yeah.
songs are going to sound completely different, but they're under the same title. Like that doesn't give you any sort of indication. That just gives you the context of the song itself.
Right.
It's like it's not like we're not putting pop and electronic in our artist names or anything like that. It's not like that's the only way you can really be like, oh, like I'm going to like somebody like this rather than somebody like this. Like genres do have to exist for a reason, but it's not like we're nailed down to one thing, and it's still
Yes.
very all encompassing. Like even specific, even like something like singer songwriter, there's still a lot of different ways that is anymore. And even as specific as you can get within the electronic world, like there's still going to be some variants, like from one song to the
Yeah.
next. It's like these are two very different things, but they do kind of coincide in the way that like they do fit the same style. So it's
Hmm.
that they have their purpose, but genres freak a lot of people out for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, which is like, it's understandable, but it's like at the end of the day, like you're just, we
Just
should
making it
just be
easier for
doing it
people
for
to get
fun.
it. You're just making
And
it,
yes,
yeah, you're
yes.
making it easier for people to find your music that should be finding your music.
Right.
So, yeah. What is the ideal listening scenario for someone to consume your music in?
Oh gosh. Yamaha HS7s. No, but um I don't know. That's a good question. I would say not on your phone. Please God, don't listen to it just on your phone, because phone speakers are crazy bad. Um or Beats. Don't listen to my music on Beats. Get like if you gotta blow like $300 on a pair of headphones, just get some Audio Technicas or what's that other brand that people rave for? God damn it, it's slipping my mind.
I
What is
meant
that
more
shit?
like the setting, like some people
Oh,
say in a
like
car, not
in
like like purely listening, like, oh, like whip out these headphones, like these I made my music for these Audio Technicas. Like
That's funny,
if
man.
you don't own those, don't listen to my music. No, like in the setting, like in the car, like some people have said at a club, some people have said like alone, like like just like chilling, like what?
That's interesting. That's fun. I mean, well, the
You
same rule applies though, but now, man, I would say latest single in the club, my last album, I would say by yourself.
okay.
Um, I don't know. I kind of like the almost like by yourself type of vibe because I do really like whenever I listen to something new, um like I always want to like kind of sit by myself and listen to it to really
Mm-hmm.
like be encapsulated in the world that the artist has created through that song.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the only way that I can really be in tuned with, okay, like where, like how am I meeting this artist, like where are they coming from, you know. um I think with um I do want to start making music to where it is like, hey, like I would like to be in a more social, like party setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say for right now, for the most part, it is more of like listening by yourself. You could pop it on in the car. Um, Headphones is cool. Um, no beats, obviously. But yeah, besides that, yeah, it's just mainly by yourself.
That's fair. I mean, I think a lot of music, like you said, like you're gonna be paying more attention to it if you're by yourself. It's just like if you're
Mm-hmm.
like watching something, like without any distractions around, you're gonna be able to understand more of the story, more of the
Right.
whole thing. Like it just kind of paints the picture a little bit more clearly, and allows you to really get the full effect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean,
100%.
I think just rule of thumb is listen to everything by yourself first, and
Yeah.
then you can decide what playlist or what category or scenario you want to put it in.
Yes.
You don't
I
want to
it's
just
very
whip out a random new song that you just found and take that risk like on aux or something like that.
yeah.
That's a bold
It's
move.
it's a bold move and I would respect it, but it's like I think the payoff sometimes can be like, oh, like this is like it's a because I feel like a lot of times if you play a certain song in the wrong setting, you'll get the idea of like, oh, like the song isn't as good
Yeah.
because it's like, okay, well, were you listening to like a John Mayer song in the club, or like were you listening
Right.
to it like by yourself,
Right.
maybe with some homies at a campfire? Like it really,
Right. Right. And
so
it's
yeah,
just
that
it's just like that's the initial relationship you essentially create with the song or even the artist.
mm-hmm.
And then like that could not be good. And then well, there goes that whole artist's kind of hope for you.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, definitely, yeah. That's a good question. I didn't really think too much about the setting part, but yeah, I think the setting like really does have a
In
kind of like
effect.
a yeah.
What do you think sets you apart from other independent artists?
The fact that I'm very inconsistent.
I don't think that sets you apart. I think that puts you right in the mix with everybody else.
um, I think it's more of like I'm not afraid to try a new idea. And I think that's why a lot of the times I'm comfortable with the aspect of like, oh, if I'm not vibing with the song, I'll just delete it because of the fact that like I was trying something new and I was like,
hmm
maybe it's getting out of the realm of like what I find aesthetically pleasing, but because I'm working out that muscle of like, okay, I'm trying this new idea, maybe I can relapse that idea in a different project and then it works better there. Um, so I think like always just trying new ideas, new sounds. Um, there will just always be like an endless amount of possibilities um, with within just like creating. I think would be what sets me apart. I never say no. I will say it's bad, but I will never say no. So
I mean, try anything once, but
right,
don't try the things
100%.
that you didn't like a second time.
100%. Yes. At least in the
You
same
know?
setting. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
If
in the
you're
same
like, man,
setting. That's yeah, back to the listening thing. Like,
yep.
you can try John Mayer at the club, but then you might
Right.
learn somewhere else. You don't want to listen to him at the club again because then you're gonna hate him.
Right. Right.
So, but yeah, no, I think experimentation is always a good thing. Like, especially like if you're like, 'cause some people are very like, I don't ever want to make like the same thing twice, and not in like write the same song kind of thing, but like same type of style. Which is I think
Mm-hmm.
kind of like what you're doing in a way, which is like you're just constantly doing something new and different. You don't really know what's going to come next. Some people like to have their catalog sound like one big conglomerate of one thing. And there's no
Yep.
wrong way to do it, but I think also like experimenting and just like experiencing new things like outside of even just music itself is going to aid your ability to create. If you're living the
Mm-hmm.
same life day in and day out, you're going to be writing the same stuff day in and day out. And if you're
Yes.
not
And
trying
that,
different things music wise, you're going to be
yeah.
making the same exact thing over and over again.
Yeah. And for, um, and sometimes that could be a good thing. Like, peanut butter, we're not always reinventing peanut butter because peanut butter, like, just, it slaps, like,
Mm-hmm.
people might add in like, oh, like this one's made with oats, or like this one is like whatever, but it's
Right.
essentially it's that same kind of taste of um oh god, I made it worse. But yeah, I think again with music, I don't think it's always necessarily a bad idea to kind of put yourself in a category or a genre, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like it might even be um, more helpful that you aren't constantly thinking in a million different places, because I
Yeah.
think a lot of times too, like that's what kind of takes me so long to create stuff, is because I'm thinking of so many different avenues and possibilities of where I can take a song that I end up just like not moving anywhere
Mm-hmm.
because of the freedom of like, oh, like where can I go? Where can I go? Um, and so I think what I like would personally, like to work on is to still have the nuances, but also how can I kind of um kind of start a formula that fits with me,
Mm-hmm.
while also keeping the audience to be like, okay, like there's some consistency here. It's not like every track is different. Because I
Right.
think eventually I will get tired of every track being different. So, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, no, it's just kind of is like how there's people that like to have everything planned,
Yep.
and there are some people that just would rather do things on a whim. And obviously those don't directly correlate to those that experiment and those that have a set kind of sound, but it's like you're right, like we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Some people
Mm-hmm.
thrive in like they like find their thing and it's like okay, like they just run with it. Other
That's
people
it.
it's like,
Boom. Yep.
like I'd rather just take my different approach to this style and then maybe try this style and like do these different things and articulate these songs in different ways, as like letting them be their own experiences rather than having them kind of all fit the mold of one thing. There's no wrong way
Mm-hmm.
about it. It's just a matter of, are you somebody who likes to experiment, or are you somebody who does the same thing? I think you're somebody who experiments, and I think I'm kind of somebody who it in most cases does the same thing. But there's like, I'm not doing anything wrong about it. You're not doing anything
Right.
wrong about it. It's
No,
just we
100%.
are different. Like, I feel like if we tried to force you to do one thing, it wouldn't give the right result. And if we tried to make me make electronic music, that wouldn't work either. So, um, you know,
Hey, don't knock
everybody,
it till you try it, you know?
if I had, if I was able to wrap my head around even using more than like the occasional synth, I would, but it's the amount of work that goes into those songs.
Man,
Not to
let
be
me tell
lazy or
you.
anything. It's not for me.
Let me tell you. The amount of work. Holy cow, man.
I'd rather sit with the piano or the guitar and then have to reiterate the whole thing to
Yes.
the computer. But
Mm-hmm.
like, that's me. So,
Mm-hmm.
bottom line is if it's that's what comes natural, that's what you should do. Moral
Yeah.
of the story.
Yeah.
So, what impact do you ultimately want to have with your music? It's kind of a tricky question when you're doing this, that, and the other thing from one project to the next. But like, what do you ultimately want people to receive from you as an artist, from your music?
Um, I think that I'm always uh evolving, not only just on the creative side, but also on the um like production and like mixing side. Um, and I think another thing that I want people to take away is that there is always something to appreciate um, within the songs that I make. I think you said it earlier that you don't necessarily have to like a song or a genre, but like
Mm-hmm.
to find little appreciations of like, oh, like I liked in this like chorus section how they did this, or like I liked this little passing that the singer did in this section. I think that if there's the audience should always try to find something that they're like, you know what, like this song wasn't a complete banger, but I did appreciate this section.
The silver lining.
Because yes, right. Because then I feel like that'll correlate to them listening to more songs and even maybe more smaller artists to be like, okay, like if they're working out that muscle of like instead of saying, oh, like I don't like it, it's garbage, done deal, they'll be able to be like, okay, well, it might not be my cup of tea, but like I at least like the flavor of lemons. So, you know.
I think I know what you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about all different kinds of music. Like, there's a reason that there is the wide variety that there is. There's something out there for everybody, and like, what I like about this song might not be what you like about this song, and it might be the reason that
Mm-hmm.
you like this music and I also like this music. Like, it all is just one giant Venn diagram of nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, there's different pieces, like, because genres like jazz influenced like rock, and like it influenced like hip hop, and like pop comes from whatever, like it's just like the genres
Yeah.
that we're getting further and further into. Like, obviously there's further classifications of these like big scape of singer songwriter, folk, electronic, hip hop, whatever. There's subgenres of those, but like, we had to start somewhere. So like, all of
Right.
these even big categories didn't always exist. And
Mm-hmm.
what is pop today isn't what was pop 20 years ago. What is
Yeah.
rock today is definitely not what it was like 40 years ago,
Right.
and electronic music has not always been a thing. So like, there's these different pieces that kind of overlap from one type to another, that are things that you can appreciate even if you didn't like the song as a whole.
Yeah. And it's like, again, like you brought up a great point of just like the constant evolution of genre and music. And it's like the only way that we can get to more refreshing,
Mm-hmm.
um, different nuances of music is if people can just be like, okay, well, I didn't like that song as a whole, but what I did like is this certain part. Because then artists, if they like this certain little thing, they can then make a song that kind of expands on that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just like a bunch of like little tiny little stars that like expand into a song. and then you keep going, and then you keep going, and
It
then
never
eventually,
ends.
yeah,
It
it'll just
never
keep moving
ends.
on and on and on. And that's really what will help, I think, music to continue as an art form, is just to always have it be changing. Like there
Mhm.
shouldn't always be um there I don't want to always I don't want to say that there should never be consistency, but it should just be fluid. It should just be more fluid instead of more of a concrete, like this is what it is.
I agree. I think, yeah, it should. I mean, that's what it is. Any like, it's just it's ever changing.
Yeah.
Um, I think that brings us to the final question, which is the overall concept for the podcast. Why music?
Um I think it's because I it's interesting because like even like before I came to Western and wanted to do like the map program stuff, um I was very much in a mindset of like, oh, like nothing is interesting to me. Like I don't want to go into business. Like I don't want to work at a restaurant or X, Y, and Z, because I felt like all of those were very objective lifestyle. It was like there is a way that you have to um, put a car together. There is a way that you have to do this certain math in order to help this client get their account shit, like whatever. Um, all of these different kind of forms that aren't art um, has more of an objective kind of like focal lens on that. And what I found out was that just kind of made me like feel trapped and small and uncomfortable. And so music was really much of this kind of thing where it kind of opened up the door, and it was like, hey, like there is a whole world out there. Like you should experience everything. And sure, some of it is going to suck. Some music to me like might not be good. But if I can, like we said, appreciate the silver lining within each music, then I will always keep evolving my thought process on not only music, but also like um, lifestyles and how to accept, other people that are different from me. And so, like, I guess that's why music is the bread and butter of just thinking creatively and thinking of nuanced ideas. So,
No, absolutely, like, it is just a different. It kind of changes the way you think and the way you kind of approach things. Like, I know
mm-hmm.
I view things differently when I'm very locked into my songwriter side and my like creative music side versus like everything else, like it's a different
Yep.
kind of perspective. And I've really been trying to lean into that more recently just because it's awesome. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I think that's a cool way to kind of put it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've been reading a little bit, so some of it wasn't completely out of my ass, but
That's good. That's good to know. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this episode of the Why Music podcast. Check back again next
yay.
week for another conversation with another independent artist. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.